Hey there, folks. It's Patrick, and I'm just a dude trying to save the world. Tonight, we're going to talk about feel-good stories. Last Sunday, as I was scrolling through the social medias, researching, I came across a post titled 9410. That's $94.10. It turned out to be one of those stories, narrated in the first person, wherein, sadly, a small family headed by a single dad was experiencing firsthand the trauma of food insecurity, this time in the grocery store. The bill came to $94.10, and when the dad swiped his card, it was declined, and he needed to choose, over and over again, items from their basic necessities to put back, and each time, his card was again declined. The narrator describes watching this and suddenly feeling a nudge to her and an electric shock to her heart, as it would turn out, from God, directing her to pay for these groceries. It should be noted that it required 2 of these nudges and subsequent shocks before she responded and offered to pick up the tab. I don't see a need to detail the rest of the story, as it is but one more self-congratulatory expository intended to, 1, aggrandize the storyteller and her generosity, and 2, cause us to believe a problem has been solved, and 3, obliquely attribute it to something outside of ourselves, in this case, God. You see them and you read them everywhere these days. The Good Samaritan, writing about, or better yet, videotaping their acts of generosity and kindness as they relate to those experiencing food insecurity and homelessness. To the folks who watch and read and repost these stories, striving to rationalize and to feel better about their actual complacency and lack of true compassion, while making themselves feel good and, more importantly, look good regarding their overall inaction and inequitable privilege, I feel it necessary to remind them of these words. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. That's in Matthew 6:4. And in the words of St. John of the Cross, God is more pleased by one work, however small, done secretly, without desire that it be known, than 1,000 done with the desire that people know them. Those who work for God with purest love not only care nothing about whether others see their works, but do not even seek that God himself know of them. Such persons would not cease to render God the same services, with the same joy and purity of love, even if God were never to know of these. I commented in the post that the tale was actually one of shame and sorrow, and I was immediately pitied by the reposter because I viewed the story as a tragedy. But these stories are unforgivable tragedies. These feel-good stories, broadcast widely, are nothing more than the band-aids I've mentioned before on the long, open, festering wound of our society. And while indeed tragic, they are all the more pitiable in their destructive diversion by the disconnected, oblivious, and self-indulgent view of what is an unfolding tragedy of truly biblical proportions. So then, in an effort to foster understanding, let me lay it down for you. In one of the most abundant countries on the planet, most minority groups make up a larger portion of the homeless population than they do of the general population. From the National Alliance to End Homelessness, African Americans make up more than 40% of the homeless population, but represent only 13% of the general population. American Indians, Alaskan Natives, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, and those of more than one race each make up less than 5% of the general population. But each group's share of the homeless population is more than double their share of the general population. The proportion of Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders in the homeless population, 1.3%, is 6.5 times higher than their proportion in the general population, which is only 0.2%. Those identifying as Hispanic make up 18% of the general population, but 21% of the homeless population. Both whites and Asians are significantly underrepresented among the homeless population. In 2018, there were 37,227,000 humans in the United States who were food insecure, and the annual food budget shortfall was $19,467,736,000. These numbers, we can be sure, have only risen from there. The United States is the global leader in food waste, with Americans discarding nearly 40 million tons of food every year. That's 80 billion pounds of food that's thrown away, that those experiencing food insecurity will never see, unless it's in a dumpster. Since June of this year, 8 million more Americans fell into poverty. You see, trickle-down economics are actually turning out to be trickle-up economics. Poverty is trickling up as we speak, and it may soon affect you and your privilege. Yes. If you're indulging in these stories, you're privileged. In a time where, now more than ever, advantage and opportunity are restricted to but a few, mostly white folks, you are privileged. Most of the folks producing these feel-good stories have had an advantage. You and I had an advantage, whether it was as small as positive reinforcement from others, or a white father investing $319.76 in a welding class and then getting you a job sticking Harley parts together in the factory where you worked, or something as seemingly insignificant as the fact that you were born white in a patriarchal, racist, and capitalistic society. Well, you have had and you continue to have privilege. In short, anybody who has pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, most usually, to be sure, had somebody who helped them buy the boots in the first place. We need to recognize and realize and pay our privilege not forward, but downward to those who have been denied and deprived any advantage or privilege for centuries now. We need to realize that these feel-good stories are nothing more than a salve, an analgesic balm, an escapist way for us to feel a heartwarming glow, imagining that somehow they are enough. Imagining that impossibly somehow the problem has been addressed, all the while ignoring the very stark reality that it has not, and that it is very rapidly becoming worse. These episodes are little more than a window, a view into a tragic, systemically broken society, a place where human life has no value. They showcase a dystopian societal dysfunction of unimaginable death and despair and destruction. These stories are an abysmal tragedy. To see them as anything less is purely ignorant and self-centered. To see them as anything less exposes your privilege. Please, feed the hungry when you can, and when you're called upon to do so, be compassionate. But do not brag about it. Do not feel good about it. Do not attribute it to God's work. The very obvious fact remains that there should be no human on the earth that goes hungry, not ever, and yet millions do. Millions of children the world over go to sleep every night with a terrible hunger in their bellies. We can no longer be complacent and comfortable in our privilege. We should instead feel enraged. When we see or read these feel-good tales, we should feel a great disappointment and more than just a little shame, because God or the force or the universe or Cthulhu or whatever energy it is that you believe makes our heartbeat work does so not independently, but through us. Through us. It is we who have manifested the current state of affairs, and it is we who maintain it. But of equal, if not greater importance, and much more than that, it is we who can change it, and we must. You don't get to feel good about these Band-Aids anymore. You, we, every one of us has to change our perspective and do what we can, do what is necessary to bring equanimity and equality to every human being on this planet. When we can do this, well, that'll be the true feel-good story. Because, like it or not, believe it or not, every human being on this planet is worthy. And believe it or not, we are all unimaginably interdependent. And, like it or not, when the least of us suffers, we all eventually will pay the price. And that price will be extraordinary and devastating. So, like, subscribe, and share if you're so inclined, because I'm just a dude. One dude, hoping to save the world. But as ever, it's going to take all of us, each and every one. I hope you're all well and safe and fed and happy. We'll see you next time.